Hello, music fans. You're watching Death by Unicorn, where I talk about metal, rock, and prog music. And today's episode, I'm going to give my top 30 albums from the 1980s. If you've been watching my channel over the past month or so, I've put out my top 10 albums of every year in the 1980s. Then I figured I would round it up at the end of once I finished every year, I figured I would put out my top 25 of the decade. But it was hard to narrow it down to just 25 because there was a lot of albums by a certain band, and I couldn't really rank them that were just outside of the top 25. So I've just included them all. And I didn't limit myself to one album per band or anything like this. So even though this is a top 30 albums of the 80s, it only consists of albums from 12 artists. So don't expect too many different artists on here. There's the 12 artists that I really love from the 80s that all put out excellent work. Now, some artists who didn't quite get into my top 30 albums, but who I still think put out excellent music in the 80s, I'll just give some quick honorable mentions. Steve Vai had his album Flexible, didn't quite get into my top 30. Queensryche had Operation Mindcrime, just missed my top 30 as well. The Alan Parsons Project had Eye in the Sky, The Turn of a Friendly Card, among others. They have also missed my top 30. And then there's Voivod with Nothing Face, also not in my top 30, but those are all excellent albums that I highly recommend. Now let's jump into my top 30. And I'll mention the tiers that they're in. There's a lot, most of them are in my excellent ranking tier. Two of them I consider masterpieces, which is the highest I would give to any album. That's my highest ranking tier. And then another 8 are near masterpieces. And then the rest are excellent. So let's start off with my excellent bunch. Rounding off the bottom of my top 30 is a bunch of albums by Iron Maiden, and they're all very consistent in quality and just excellent albums. I initially thought maybe only the top two, probably my two favorite albums from Iron Maiden in the 80s are The Number of the Beast and Powerslave. I initially thought of just making those my number 24 and my 25 and then just doing a top 25. But the other albums from Maiden are also close to that in quality that I wanted to make it a top 30. So I've got Peace of Mind, Seventh Son of a Seventh Son, Killers, and Iron Maiden, their self-titled debut. Those ones are all kind of tied at number 26 to number 30. Oh, I forgot Somewhere in Time. So Somewhere in Time, they're self-titled, Killers, Seventh Son of a Seventh Son, and Peace of Mind. They're all kind of tied at the bottom of my list here, number 26 to 30. Then at number 25, I got Powerslave by Iron Maiden, and at number 24, I've got The Number of the Beast by Iron Maiden. So that's all the Iron Maiden stuff from the 80s. They're rounding off the bottom of my top 30. Number 23 is Duke by Genesis, more of a pop. Well, it's kind of still pretty progressive, actually. Great album by Genesis. And then number 22 is the self-titled album by Genesis. This one's a bit poppier than Duke, but I still like it a lot. And if you want to hear more of my thoughts on these albums, you'll have to watch the videos that I did on each year where I go into my top 10. I talk a little bit more about them. But since I'm going to talk about 30 albums in this video, I'm not going to describe the albums too much. I'm just kind of giving a list. Number 21 is Synchronicity by The Police. A great kind of new wave album. Number 20 is Departure by Journey. Awesome kind of hard rock, arena rock, pop rock album. And then I've got a bunch in a row here by Journey. Number 19 is Raised on Radio by Journey. Number 18 is Escape by Journey. Number 17 is Frontiers by Journey. And then number 16, maybe a surprising pick for my favorite Journey album, but it really is Dream After Dream, which is a film soundtrack, but it's by Journey, and it's a bit more on the progressive rock side, which I like, and it still has Steve Perry on vocals, who I think is the best Journey vocalist. Number 15 of the 80s, I've got The Game by Queen, just a great rock album. Number 14, let's talk about some thrash metal. It's Peace Sells But Who's Buying by Megadeth. Number 13, Defenders of the Faith by Judas Priest, a great heavy metal album. Number 12, Big Generator by Yes, an awesome pop rock album. I know a lot of people don't like Yes's pop rock period in the 80s. I like their 80s work. I like it more than the stuff they did in the 90s. Obviously their 70s work is my favorite, but I still like their 80s work a lot. I think it's really good. I felt more like they let me down in the 90s more than anything. Number 11 is Past Masters by the Beatles. This is maybe a weird one to include because it's more of a compilation of stuff. It's all the non-album tracks by the Beatles. Obviously, it was all recorded in the 60s, but the compilation Past Masters came out in 1988, I think. So I included it on my list. I don't usually include compilations, but this one's an exception. It's just a great compilation by the Beatles. You got to have it here. Past Masters by the Beatles. Now, those are all the ones that I had in my excellent tier. Now let's get into near masterpieces, things that didn't quite get my very topmost score of masterpiece, but are almost there. At number 10, a near masterpiece, I've got And Justice for All by Metallica. Great thrash metal album. Some people criticize the lack of bass on the album. Maybe if the bass was louder, maybe it could make its way up to a true masterpiece. But I think the songs are just great. Number 9, I've got Master of Puppets by Metallica. Another awesome one by these thrash metal legends. My favorite Metallica album. Number 8 is Beat by King Crimson. They're kind of going more new wave on this one than progressive rock, which is kind of interesting. I like the 80s version of King Crimson. I know not a lot of people consider it their favorite, but actually my favorite period of King Crimson is with Adrian Belew on vocals, because I just think he brings like a weird, quirky, humorous Zappa-like energy to King Crimson that I like in the band. Number 7 is Three of a Perfect Pair, also by King Crimson. Great prog rock album. Still has a bit of that new wave, but a bit more on the prog side than Beat. Number 6 is 90125 by Yes. Awesome pop rock album. It's just masterfully done. Number 5 is Drama by Yes, my favorite Yes album from the 80s. Still has their signature progressive rock sound, but doesn't have John Anderson on vocals. Features Trevor Horn on vocals. He's from the band The Buggles. Kind of a weird combination that you wouldn't have expected to work, but it works amazingly well. It's just great music on this album, Drama by Yes, at number 5. Now at number 4, I'll start showing some physical copies here. I got Signals by Rush. Really great album by Rush. I think for me, it's their last kind of near masterpiece album, and after that they go a bit downhill. I still like Grace Under Pressure that comes next, but it's maybe more kind of going more new wave and synthesizer heavy. I prefer the prog period of Rush. My number 3 album of the 1980s is Discipline by King Crimson. Just an awesome album to kind of reintroduce King Crimson to the world after they I think this came out in 1980, and their one before it was 1974. The band kind of disbanded, and it reformed with a new lineup here. They were going to call the band Discipline, but they decided to stick with the name King Crimson. and I'm glad they did, because now it's part of the King Crimson canon, and it's a great album. Discipline by King Crimson at number 3. Now we're getting into the 2 masterpieces that I have on my list from the 80s. First one at number 2 is Permanent Waves by Rush. Really awesome album here that I've got on vinyl. This, I mean, it's just perfect. Spirit of the Radio, awesome way to open an album. Probably my favorite song on here, but really every song is great. And my number 1 album of the 80s is also by Rush, Moving Pictures. My favorite Rush album. Side 1 has all the big hits: Tom Sawyer, Red Barchetta, YYZ, and Limelight. Great side 1, just amazing. You've got, stuff that can play on radio, plus you've got that great instrumental YYZ. And side 2 is also awesome, has a bit of the deeper cuts, The Camera Eye, Witch Hunt, and Vital Signs. Every song is amazing. Perfect album. And that's my top 30 albums of the 1980s. Hope you enjoyed it. I will put the list in the description of the video if I remember to do so. What are your favorite albums of the 1980s? Let me know down below. I'm sure I've missed some great stuff, even from my list and even from my honorable mentions. I know there's a lot of stuff that I haven't heard, or there's stuff that I've heard that just hasn't grabbed me yet, and maybe I need to spend some more time with it. Like I've heard some great stuff by Marillion that just didn't quite make my list, but maybe it could. I know there's some good Deep Purple albums. Primus started in the 80s with their first album. Mike Oldfield put out some pretty good albums. Yeah, so those are some of the other ones that I didn't mention, but maybe if I spend more time with them, would rise up and get into my top 30. Let me know what you think of my list as well, and stay tuned for future videos. Peace out.